Hello, Year 11. This is Lesson 3 of 3 lessons on the Unit B2.2 on cell division and stem cells. Today's objective in the lesson is to be looking at the other type of cell division, how cells divide by meiosis. The learning objectives are that for all pupils to know that meiosis is when cells divide to produce cells with half the number of chromosomes, and why. Most pupils to be able to describe the different steps in meiosis, and some pupils to discuss some of the problems that arise when meiosis goes wrong. So the first thing I would like you to do is to watch the second half of the clip from the bbc.co.uk Learning Zone site. So if I minimize this and the show a second, we can go and watch it full screen.
The only place in the body where mitosis is not used to make new cells is the production of sex cells. This process is called meiosis. Meiosis starts with a normal cell just like mitosis. But immediately before a cell divides, the DNA of every chromosome is copied, leaving the cell with twice its usual number of chromosomes. In meiosis, 2 chromosomes mix up their genes. They do this by a process called recombination. The cell then divides. The chromosomes line up in the centre and spindles attach. As they are pulled apart, the cell starts to divide. The resultant 4 cells, known as haploid, have only half the normal genetic material. This is important, as if they are successful, they will meet a gamete cell, which is an egg or a sperm, and combine to produce a unique diploid cell, which is an embryo.
So in that video, we could see that meiosis is all about creating the sex cells or gametes. So it happens in sex organs, so in the testes in males, in the ovaries in females, and it happens in the anthers of flowering plants to produce the pollen, and in the ovaries of flowering plants to produce the ovules. Meiosis is different to mitosis in that instead of there being 2 daughter cells created at the end, there are 4 daughter cells. Those 4 daughter cells are all genetically different and are all haploid, whereas mitosis, the 2 daughter cells are genetically identical and are diploid. I'm going to run through the stages in meiosis, and there are a couple of important differences. So to begin with, it looks exactly the same as the first type of cell division, mitosis. So here in this cell, we can see 4 chromosomes. This is our parent cell, so this would be found in the sex organ, either in the testes and the ovaries of an animal, or in the ovaries and anthers of a plant. The parent cell, first of all, makes copies of its chromatids, so they've now become like little X's, they've become chromosomes. They make identical copies of themselves. Similar chromosomes will pair up with one another. And as they pair up, the next thing they do is they start to swap little bits of information. So it's almost like these little arms and legs that I've spoken about before on these chromosomes. They're not technically called arms and legs, but these little bits literally just swap between them. This mixing up of the DNA is really important. It creates variation in the cells so that each sperm and each egg, each ovule and each pollen is carrying slightly different DNA. If this didn't happen, this crossing over and mixing up of DNA, every time your parents went to have another sibling, a brother or sister for you, then you would be exactly the same as them. You wouldn't have this mixing up of DNA. By mixing it up, your siblings probably have similarities, and they might have similar hair colour, eye colour, shape of facial features and things like that, but there will be differences between you as well. So crossing over is really significant to create variety or variation. Then the cell splits once, the chromosomes divide, and then they split a second time. So there are 4 now genetically different cells, And instead of them having 4 chromosomes like the original parent cell had, they now have 2 chromosomes. They have half the genetic information. And if you look inside these cells, you can see they've got mixing up of the different colours of the chromosomes that was used here. So there are a couple of questions on meiosis. The process by which a zygote develops into an embryo, a zygote is a fertilized egg cell, is going to be mitosis. Then there's a question about drawing a table summarizing the similarities and differences between meiosis and mitosis. So we're going to cover that in a bit more detail. And are all the body's cells genetically identical or not? Explain your answer. Well, all of the body's cells that are somatic, the skin, the muscle, the hair, they will all be genetically identical, but your sex cells will not be genetically identical. You occasionally have some body cells that will make mistakes when they copy themselves. This is called a mutation. And when that happens, occasionally, for example, you get a cell that produces more melanin than other skin cells. So you get a little dark spot, a beauty spot, we call them, or a freckle. And if that starts to rapidly grow out of control, that's when we can have skin cancer. So these questions are not in your book, I don't think. Okay, so you can just answer these on paper. But there are some questions on page 9 in your book and a similar image to the image that was found on mitosis. If we look at that image, so I'm just going to switch between this and the publisher document. So we can find in publisher, here's our image on this page here. In this image, we can see 4 chromosomes at the start. Those chromatids make copies of themselves, so they become chromosomes. They split once, and here we can see the crossing over, the mixing up of the DNA to create variation, and then they split a second time. 4 daughter cells, each with exactly half the amount of DNA as the original parent cell, and a mixed up DNA as well, slightly different to the original parent cell. So on these questions, if you have a go at answering them, and then I'm going to go over the answers. So if you pause the video at this point to answer, I will give you the answers in a second. So how many daughter cells does meiosis produce? It is 4. How many chromosomes do the daughter cells in humans have? Each of these daughter cells in a human cell would have 23. So if this parent cell here was in a male, this would be in the testes, and these daughter cells would be sperm. If this parent cell was in the ovaries, then these daughter cells would be ovules or eggs. Meiosis, therefore, is used to create the sex cells or gametes. That's a key word for sex cell. And where does it take place? Inside the sex organs. It sometimes is referred to as reduction division. That word reduction means to make less, to reduce, and it's referred to as reduction division because the chromosome number is being halved. Why is crossing over of parts of the chromosome so important in this type of division? Is to ensure variation. Now, there are a couple of tasks that I would like you to have a go at doing, and they involve comparing mitosis and meiosis. So first of all, I'm going to go to my slide. From this current slide. And we've created a table. So that was one of the questions I asked you a couple of slides back to compare mitosis and meiosis. If we look on the left-hand side, mitosis creates 2 daughter cells, whereas meiosis is 4 gametes or daughter cells. The daughter cells in mitosis for growth and repair are always diploid. So in a human, they would have 23 pairs of chromosomes or 46, which is the diploid number. Whereas in meiosis in a human, the daughter cells have only 23 chromosomes. They are haploid. That's the haploid number. Daughter cells are genetically identical to one another in mitosis, whereas in meiosis, the daughter cells, the gametes, are all genetically different to mix up that DNA and help with variety and variation. Daughter cells in mitosis are genetically identical to the parent cell because there is no genetic crossing over. The gametes are different to the parent cell. They have a different amount of DNA. They have half the amount of DNA, and they also have different types of the DNA. Mitosis is considered a one-stage process, whereas meiosis is 2 stages, 2 lots of divisions. Mitosis can happen everywhere in the body, whereas meiosis can only happen in the reproductive organs. The sperm are created in the testes, the eggs in the ovaries, the pollen in the anthers, and the ovules in the ovaries. So you've got a task. Now again, these little cards are on the back cover of your book, but again, there's something on the back. So you can either print out just that page separately, or it might be easiest just to write these statements down into the correct headings. On these first 2 slides, these boxes are not underneath the correct headings, okay? So they've all been just mixed up randomly. So I would like you to either cut them out, okay, and stick them in the correct columns for mitosis and meiosis, or write them out if that's easiest for you, whichever. Once you've done it, so you could pause the video to do that task, these are the correct boxes underneath the correct headings now. So these are the answers. So for mitosis, produces cells with a diploid number of chromosomes. When out of control, a cancerous tumour may result. The original parent cell becomes 2 daughter cells. The daughter cells have the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell, and this type of division is important for the repair of damaged tissue, where new cells must be identical to the damaged cells, and it also enables the species to colonize an area quickly using asexual reproduction, so just like our bacteria and our yeast reproducing. In meiosis, we have enables the species to adapt to a changing environment by bringing in variety and variation because of the crossing over. It's called cell division by reduction. There are 4 daughter cells made. The daughter cells contain half the number of chromosomes as the parent cell, and it produces new genetic combinations in individuals. There is a second slide continuing. Mitosis continuing, the daughter new cells are copies of the parent cell. This ensures that the number of chromosomes remains the same in sexually reproducing organisms. It's important for the growth of plants and animals. Chromosomes of the parent cell are duplicated in the daughter cells. It produces clones, and the DNA is copied exactly if there are no mutations. And I've just spotted a mistake. This pale peachy coloured one here, this should actually be in meiosis. Ensuring the number of chromosomes remain the same in sexually reproducing organisms. By it being in meiosis, it creates cells that have haploid numbers so that when those 2 sex cells join together at fertilization, it restores the full diploid chromosome number. And our ones for meiosis happens only in gamete-producing organs, the testes, ovaries, pollen sacs and ovules. Produces cells with the haploid number of chromosomes, increases the variety of offspring, and forms gametes. The next task in your book, again, this is a cut and paste type task, okay? If you're able to either print off this page or you can draw it out to allow you to cut these out, you've got to arrange the diagrams in the order that they should go. One of these types of cell division has only 1 division and 2 cells. It should be pretty obvious, okay? And one has 2 lots of divisions and 4 daughter cells. Be very careful when you look at these daughter cells at the bottom here, because some of them have got different numbers of chromosomes. Obviously, the mother cell is going to be the same at the start of each of them, but one process is mitosis and one is meiosis. When you've completed that cut and paste section, there's a little bit of reading to do on page 12. There's some information about mitosis, and all I want you to do is underline the sections which relate to the diagrams that you've just put together for mitosis. And the same then when you read through the information on meiosis, just underline the sections that relate only to the diagrams. For practice at Gcse, from page 13 up to page 16 are past paper questions purely on haploid, diploid and mitosis and meiosis. You can complete those. The answers are also within this PowerPoint as well. So you can either go through the PowerPoint separately to get those answers once you've completed it. And I am putting an assignment onto Moodle, which is an extended writing assignment. It is a 6-marker question. So I'm just going to find where the question is on here. This was a past paper question from a few years back, 2017. Describe and explain the differences between mitosis and meiosis. There are 6 marks. Give as much detail as you possibly can. Don't forget to do capital letters at the start of sentences, full stops at the end. If you prefer to write this on paper first and then type it into Moodle when you submit your response, that's perfectly fine. So if you want to include it somewhere in your booklet or just on a piece of paper, that's absolutely fine. I will be setting an extension task concerning stem cells, which would be the 4th lesson. So if people are keen to crack on and complete the lesson on stem cells, that will be on Moodle as an extension task. Thank you very much, and we look forward to you returning soon.